And we're live. Welcome to Don't Be Coy. I'm your host, Unkle Lew, and today I have the honor, pleasure, and the utmost appreciation to have with me today Miss Kayvia Pemberton. Kayvia, thank you for being on the show. How are you doing this morning?
I am doing well, enjoying some great sunshine. So, yes.
Oh man, that's beautiful. That's totally different than what I'm experiencing this morning with this rain in Washington. So, how was
Oh,
your how was your previous week?
it has been good. I will talk about it more, but I work in emergency management. So, there were a lot of pivots in my plans as to where I'd even be today or the next few days. So, happy to say I'm in Atlanta. Thought I was going to be in Uganda. So, that's, quite different. But
Oh wow. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Now let's go ahead and get this started. So, for the people at home, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am originally from Rhode Island, a proud Rhode Islander coming from the smallest state. I've spent most of my time working and living up in the Northeast in either Rhode Island, Massachusetts, or Connecticut. I've recently relocated to Atlanta, Georgia. I've been here for a year now, and I work with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention as an emergency preparedness specialist as well as program manager for our team.
Okay. Yeah. No, that sounds cool.
Mm.
What I wanted to talk with you today is a little bit around like that emergency preparedness, but like really unpacking that full move of coming from like the Northeast to the Southeast. I'm sure there's a lot of stories to unpack there. So, let's go ahead
Very
and
good.
let's go ahead and get started. What inspired you to pursue emergency management and emergency preparedness?
Sure. So while I was in undergrad, I went to Smith College. I would say even entering college for undergrad, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I knew I specifically chose a liberal arts college because it was like, all right, you have enough academic interests where during these 4 years, I'm going to figure it out. I took economics during my first semester at Smith, and I was like, I could take another 10 courses in this. So I signed up to be an econ major. And at that time, I don't know if it's still like this, I'm sure it is, but Smith had a very strong push for econ majors to go into iBanking. I took a seminar while I was there for a weekend that really introduced you to what the work in finance looked like. And I was like, yeah, this is not for me. Love economics, did not like the iBanking life. And however, at this point, it was my last year of college. So I did undergrad in 3 years. So I had 1 year to kind of say, well, what do I really want to do once I leave this place? And at that time, a lot of courses started to be offered around the study of disasters and that impact. And I started to really take in that information. So, examining Hurricane Katrina from a sociology perspective, looking at the GIS mapping behind the impacts of disaster. I was doing a lot of academic work around it, and it was so interesting to me. And when I asked about it, they said, oh yeah, people do this as a career. So leaving Smith, I decided to pursue at least an internship in emergency management when I left college. I will say also, the one last course, literally my last course, well, for my undergrad career was a public health course, the first and only one I took during undergrad. And I was like, this also is very interesting, tucked it in the back of my mind and headed to do back home to Rhode Island to do an internship with our city emergency management office, so Providence Emergency Management Agency.
Oh,
And that's where it got started.
okay, that's cool. So, like, what does that kind of education pathway look like for someone that's in like emergency management? So, like, did you like work your way up? I know, like, obviously you got your master's in public health
Mhm.
because we did that together, but like, um, I guess what does that building that career look like in emergency management?
So I will say that emergency management is one of those fields where education is not, I guess, how do you say, a hindrance to your path forward. And I say that because people have come from a lot of different education backgrounds. So working in public health, you have to kind of have an MPH. But working in emergency management, I came from a public health and econ background. I've seen people who have had not the traditional education, but sometimes just came through the military and had that experience that
Hmm.
they brought into emergency management. I've seen people that have actually, as emergency management became more popular, they've done more certificates and actual courses are being offered at universities, and they've gone that route. But really, emergency management is a field that experience matters.
Yeah.
It very much trumps education because it's one thing to say that you've studied this is how disasters go, and it's another same thing to say, well, I went out and I helped respond to Hurricane Florence, and I've done that setup before, and that's really more valued than the education. So I would say experience, and of course having that fundamental understanding of how the systems work, but those are all free online courses that are offered that can really help you at least catch up to speed so that you're able to speak the same language as everyone else working in emergency management.
Yeah. So, part of my ignorance for it, like I understand I guess you could say the core, um, I have a core understanding of like how emergency management and emergency like preparedness works. Like when a disaster strikes, like how do you manage like providing water, shelter, resources for individuals? Like I understand, I guess you could say that portion of it, but
Mhm.
like as you mentioned, there are I guess multiple ways that an individual can enter it, whether it's from experience within the military, which makes a lot of sense, taking certificates, just really and truthfully, how do you get that experience and getting into emergency management? And so, like, how does your public health degree help and support that to give you a more robust experience of how you approach emergency management?
Mhm. Let's see. So I think getting into it is probably one of the hardest parts because, as I said, experience is valued above most things. Um, but of course, if you can't get the experience, you can't continue to move up. I think for a lot of people that are just starting out, I would recommend kind of something I did similar to what I did myself, which is that internship,
Mm,
the first year out of college. So I will say, of course, it was an easier time to do an internship than if you're older and switching fields or something, because it was, of course, an unpaid internship. But I was able to really work, get that experience, and then move on. But I would say working at the local level tends to be the easier way to really break into emergency management. They always need assistance. It's a little easier just to get into, and when I say local level, really not state level, but that city level. They're looking for that assistance. They're a little more generous in offering opportunities. And then, of course, there are some more larger programs like you can find where maybe you can get a position or some type of work with the American Red Cross or AmeriCorps, and get that experience there. But until you get that experience, you're really going to have a hard time moving up. For me, with my public health degree, when I came into emergency management and after that one course in undergrad, I really knew I loved public health. I really did develop a passion. I started doing more independent research just about public health in general and found out, oh, so there's even a specific niche inside emergency management for public health,
mm,
and that is public health preparedness. So I would say with that, I knew, and even that is still very broad because there's between my last job at AmeriCares and my current job with the CDC, I was definitely working with AmeriCare, still in public health preparedness, but focused around helping health centers, safety net health centers, prepare for natural disasters and how to continue their operations and serve their patient population during that time. Whereas at the Centers for Disease Control, now I'm doing a lot more, how do we respond to disease outbreak?
Mm.
So it's still a very big field where you can move in around a lot. I know I work with people that work in surveillance, a lot of epidemiologists, data analysts at this level. But public health, I think my favorite thing, my the biggest benefit about going to get that degree was that it allowed me to meld the two worlds. So there was the experience of being in emergency management, but there was also the public health side that allowed me the analysis, the understanding of how these things work, and to especially in some places when people don't have the MPH, it's a little easier to help meld the research into influencing our decisions as to how we're going to carry out a response or what we're going to focus on when it comes to preparedness. So making more data informed decisions, I guess.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm.
So I guess my next question to you is like, why Atlanta? Like, is it because of the CDC in itself and being able to leverage those public health skills and that data decision driven work, or was it more on a personal side? Like, I'm curious as far as like why the pivot towards the from the northeast to the southeast.
Yeah, I think when you've lived in snow for many decades, you think that everywhere that doesn't have snow is so much better. So that definitely drove part of my decision. But the CDC was the other side. So I've always, in working in public health, I knew that CDC worked at the level that I wanted to do. So me personally, I like my focus to be on a very macro level. I want to focus on how we respond as a nation,
Mm.
how we work with other ministries of health or helping other countries prepare. I didn't really want to work at the local level unless it was even, as I did in my last position, working with multiple cities and states at the same time. So I knew that the CDC would allow me to work at this level. So when I got the opportunity, I was like, oh, great. This is the dream job. This is the dream organization, agency, and I'm going to go. So I think for me, it was the goal all along. We talked before about, that tenure and that plan and that really detailed plan that you have for your life. And that was mine, that I'm going to end up at the CDC. I'm going to be working in emergency management. So I think the goal was always pushing me towards Atlanta to work at the CDC. So that was really what drove me here.
Yeah, no, that sounds really cool. So like I'm curious, like, and I can hear your passion when you're talking about like emergency management and emergency preparedness. Like, can you talk about how working at the CDC and being a program manager, what some of the work that you've been able to do to help not only at that local level but also at that large macro level, which um, has been like the driver for what you wanted to do?
Sure, I can. um, I had to double check. I was like, with everything you say at the agency, it's like, oh man, did I get permission? But
Yeah.
no, I definitely say. So I've been able to do a lot of work around our ports of entry, and really, so I really work with our quarantine branch that does, I guess, protection of our ports of entry. So looking out for infectious diseases coming through the border, through travel via land, via air, via maritime. So of course, as you can imagine, COVID was a very busy time for us,
Mm.
but a lot of my work right now has stemmed around helping those ports of entry create plans for what they're going to do how they're going to respond should an incident present itself or should a public health concern present itself. I've also been able to do a lot of, and which is always my favorite part and why I love working at this level, a lot of traveling and getting to experience different things. So over the last year, I've only been with the CDC for a year. I've been able to go and assist with Operations Allies Welcome, which was the Afghanistan repatriation mission last year. Um, that was that was a very interesting experience, as well as assisting one of our ports of entry in Puerto Rico, um, giving a little more assistance that was needed during COVID-19
Mm.
as part of their response. Most recently, I was, that's why you hear me mention Uganda earlier. I was going to help them and serve as a technical advisor for some of the exercises they're doing there. Um, so that's some of the work that I do. I
Yeah.
think in emergency management, it always tends to switch up really quickly. Things can change in the blink of an eye as soon as something new presents itself. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes sense. It sounds like you're in the past year you've worked on 3 projects. That's pretty fast paced for in 4 months time frame. Just say for example, a new project's coming up, and like each one of these things, which I thought was really interesting, like um, the COVID-19 response, the Afghanistan aspect, and within Uganda. Like these are not things that you really hear a lot about on the media, and I can't say that I'm the most informed citizen when it comes to reading the newspaper, watching the news stories, reading things on the internet, um, through like verified media channels, if you will. Um, I don't really hear a lot about these things. So like, what? Why is that? Is that just my personal, like I'm missing out, or how is this? I guess you could say marketed out to the masses.
Hmm. Um, I would say some things tend to be bigger than others. And also, so I definitely think like with everything that was happening in Afghanistan, we definitely heard about it um,
Yeah.
nationally or internationally at that level. But of course, I think that things happen and we have so much access to so many things that are happening across the world that things change in a split second. Whereas
Mm,
public health emergencies go on for months and sometimes years.
yeah.
So you might be hearing about it when it's, I'm going to say hot news, but the first month, maybe 2 months, but they tend to cycle it out after a while. Whereas we're still responding, um, 6 months, a year later, because that's just how long the response takes. And then, of course, even our response doesn't mean that you're following the extent of the impact of these disasters on people. I think about like Hurricane Katrina and how people were still recovering even a decade later, you
Hmm.
know. So, but of course, you're not going to hear that in the media at this time because that's considered old news or it's long gone or past that we don't even reference it anymore
Yeah.
in terms of a current events. um, but I will say, just as clarification, the trip to Uganda was not an emergency. It was more on the preparedness side of emergency management. So I work in two areas. I work on helping people prepare for if something's going to happen, and then helping people respond because something has already happened. So
Yeah.
Uganda was going to be on the side of helping prepare.
Yeah. No, I think, just listening to that response that you just gave, which was a beautiful response in itself, I think it says a lot about mission driven work and like when people have a passion towards things. And like, I'm curious towards like how you, uh, I guess you could say how you had such clarity in yourself to pursue a role that filled your full self. And so, like, to explain that a little bit or give some context, like, I heard 3 different things. Like, you just said, like, with your job, you not only help with the preparedness of if something's going to happen, but when something has already happened. And then also, I heard you talk a little bit of a snippet around how your job in itself allows you to travel, which something that fills your personal cup. And so I'm curious about like um the question that I asked before, because I think that that's a very um intuitive realization from an introspective perspective, because
Mhm.
it's like, you're living the dream. Like, even you said so yourself, like your dream job was working in um Atlanta, or working in the CDC. And so, like, I'm curious around how does that exactly feel for you on a daily basis? And, like, how do you think about what's next when you've reached that point?
S- That is a great question. It really is. Um, when it comes to fueling things that fuel myself, I think I sit or a lot with my thoughts even from an early age. And I knew that, if you're going to have me spending 40 hours plus doing anything, I better love it.
Mm,
Because even just, how the average person's day is set up, like we spend all this time at work. By the time we get back, if you have a family or not, you have these few hours to spend and then you're going to sleep. And I was like, oh, I need to love what I'm doing if
yeah.
I'm going to be there for that long and putting my life and energy into it. So even before undergrad, it was very hard for me to say what I do like. And it was discouraging for me at first because I couldn't say, oh, some people are like, I love doing this, I love doing this. But one thing I could always tell you is a long list of things I do not like. I will not be doing this, I won't be doing that. So one thing I knew is like, I can't be a person that I need change in my life. I need to be a lot of moving parts. But so that was one thing that, stood out to me, emergency management, that, we could be working on this for 2 months and then all of a sudden there was a change. And I liked that. It kept things exciting. It kept me on my toes.
Hmm.
um, I also knew that whatever I did, I wanted it to have an impact on the lives of others. But at the same time, I knew I wasn't a person that wanted to deal with people one on one. So I was like, all right, I want to affect change at the population level or at the system level. How can I do that?
Mm,
So it was a lot of, I don't like this, but I can do this and I do like this. Even travel. I love traveling both personally and for my work, but I also love culture, and that was a big thing for me. So even just being exposed, not just to other cultures, but how other countries do emergency management, how they view emergency management, what are the issues that are um, prioritized in the way they do emergency management was interesting to me, as well as still there finding a balance because though I love travel, I also love connecting with community and putting down roots. So that was a big thing with me. Okay, I'll travel for my job, but you guys can't make it so much that I'm not able to have a life back at home or, make friends, build a community. So those are all things that were important to me. So I do really spend a lot of time sitting with myself and saying, okay, even if you don't know what you do like or what you want, tell me what you don't want, because we can build off of that as well.
yeah.
Um, Go ahead.
No, I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious
Yeah.
what your process is like for something like that, because like even whenever I was just sitting here taking down my notes for this, I was
Mhm.
like, write what you like and you don't. And then like an anxiety went through my body, was like, oh, gotta sit down and write.
Ah, That's hilarious. I guess that part goes into the planning part of me. So I'm very list oriented. I make a list of everything. So
Okay.
yeah, so this just falls into my natural. This is who I am. Like, I will make a list of the pros and cons of having a birthday party. Do I really want to do this, or do I want to just go out to eat and I'll be fine on my own? But that part is just like really. For me is it just helps my thoughts get out on paper, and for me that's that's always been a way that just helps me um, clearly think about things, as well as helps free up space in my mind. Elsewise, I feel like everything's just, running around inside my head. But one thing I did want to touch on, because we talked about me being at my self-proclaimed dream job, but is just what that experience is like, because I know, especially at this young age, I won't say how old I am, but this young age, I think that people are still working towards their dream job or their dream company, or maybe they didn't identify that. And I will say it is, I think it's a blessing and a curse, to be
Hmm.
really honest. I think it's great to have gotten here at this age, but and I say that because I still have time to pivot if I don't like it. Versus, deciding I don't like it and I never got to this point to, decades ago. I know that is a fortunate place to be in, because it's not like we get to control when the dream is realized or not. We just work towards it until, it comes to fruition.
Mm.
But I will say, I think one thing I've learned in this time, because with every company, and I think that was probably the one place I went wrong, I made a company the dream instead of a purpose or the impact that I would have. And I think with every company, there's pros and cons, the grass always seems greener until you get there. And I think that holds true for the agency, of course. There were things that I was able to do in nonprofit or in academia that I can't do in government. There's also things I'm able to do in government that I can't do in nonprofit or academia. Um, so at this point, as I look towards the future and where does my career take me next, I've really stopped thinking about companies, and I've started thinking about what is the impact I want to do? What do I want to be working towards? Like, what is driving me in my overall goals? Because even if it switches out from being specifically emergency management, am I still working to what drives me in general, which I think really ties back to that. Am I having an impact on populations and bettering the lives of populations, even within public health? And I can do that from many other places. So I think right now I'm going with the flow. I think, again, we talked about this before, but I think I've also entered that place where I'm like, I don't think I can create that detailed 10, 20-year plan again. I'm going to go with opportunities as they present themselves to me. But I know what I, in general, want it to look like. And I think that's what having that, I guess you would call it, mission statement for my life is going to really look like.
Man, I love this. I love this so much. So I have a curious question for you. So
Mhm.
um I heard you speak a lot about, just to kind of reiterate and just make sure that I'm hearing correctly about, finding your passion and like how we go about, how you chose to find your passion within emergency preparedness by realizing, okay, if I'm going to be doing this my entire life, I have to love it. It has to have an impact because if I'm going to be doing something, it has to fit towards my overall purpose. And like, I love when you said, work towards the dream till it comes to fruition. I think that that's such a profound statement because at the end of the day, you know, as individuals, we're always ever changing. And so for us to have one dream, we can have one dream as far as just like for certain type of specific subjects, but in
Mhm.
overarchingly, that dream can morph, right? Like we can sit here and we could say, "Oh, I want to have a family," but that might be a vague topic. Like, what does that family look like? Where is that family going to be located? All of these different aspects to it. And you're always striving towards understanding and getting that more clarity and carving out this like vision towards you. And um especially whenever you're saying like when a job has to be able to fill a purpose, it has to have that impact and drive. And I guess what's interesting to me is how you take that not only for your professional self, but also your personal self as well, and how you do that balance. And I'm curious to know, how do you weigh one or the other in your decision making process? Because, like you said beforehand, like, you came to the CDC, it sounded like for two reasons. One, you got tired of the snow, and which is a personal thing, right? Like, professionally, it doesn't matter if it snows or not. And then, um, because you wanted to have that macro level influence, which you've been able to do. And so, like, I'm curious, in your decision making process now that you've, been doing this for like a year and different things of that nature, like, how are you weighing those decisions on a daily basis? Do you say, hey, I focus on building my community here first and like making sure that I'm okay there? Or do you focus on, I'm diving deep into my work? Or is it a balance between the two? I'm really curious around how you approach that, um, because it seems like you're so aware in yourself that, you consider those things as well.
Yeah. Um, I think that it has to be a balance between the two, and it's not a 50-50 balance. I think it just has to be, what is the priority um, right now, and what really is the bigger goal in this moment. And so it would be great to be able to compartmentalize things and be like, all right, we're going to dive really deep in career, and that's not going to affect over here, or we can keep them separate, but they always feed off of each other. So I'll give an example. One of my goals has always been to work abroad. um, with that, however, one of my goals is also, or one of my desires, I'll say, is also to settle down and meet someone and get married. The two do conflict. So for me, I oftentimes have to, like, even going to Uganda, that was I think it was only a 2-month thing, but it's like, okay, um, maybe it's worth sacrificing 2 months now because you can see if this is what you really like. I know that would take away time from, especially the summer, and this is, a summer where people are more out and about than they have been other years during the pandemic. So it's a great time to meet people, great time to continue to build a community. But I know this is a strong desire in my for me to go abroad, and 2 months is a great opportunity to do it. Versus, thinking about long term, and I'm meeting people, and oh, this person seems great, but they don't want to move abroad, or they have no desire to live abroad. Is it that strong of a desire in me that I now am measuring it in partners? So I think it's always balancing in the moment. Is how important is this, and is it outweigh my desire to do the other thing? And I think one way, maybe this isn't, I don't know, this is an interesting way to look at it, is sometimes I just go and ask myself, at the end of if at your end of your life, if you had to look back and you said you didn't do this, would you be okay with that?
Mhm.
And I know that's, hopefully that's decades and decades away, but it really has helped me to say, if I never did, I can't think of something, but if I never did this, if I never was the president of the United States at my death, I think I'd be okay. You know what I mean? But if someone told me you never lived outside of the country, even for a few months, that part doesn't sit as well with me. I'm not saying I need to live there for 10 years, but even a few months having that experience would make me happy. And so I think I start to even weigh that out, and then start to see, where can I fit it in? And I guess I do a cost benefit analysis personally.
Yeah, that's funny. So, and I think it's interesting, like you said, you're a list person. So, another way of doing this is another list, right?
Yes.
But I love it though. I really love, really, and sitting down thinking about, like, if I never did this, how would I feel? And I think that for us there are a lot of things, and even like those small things around like living outside the country, I think like, we grow up dreaming big, right? But for some strange reason, like like those dreams become smaller and smaller based upon our experiences, and then we have to start back dreaming big again. And like it's interesting because I was actually having a conversation with one of my team members, and like we were talking about careers, and
Hmm.
like um, they were speaking about how they wanted to advance in their careers, and I was just like, well, have you spoken to like someone that's in that role that you're interested in? And he was like, oh, I didn't know that I could do that. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, well, I thought that managers just spoke to managers on their level. And I was just like, no, I mean, like that's just another person. You can reach out to them and things like that.
Hmm.
Obviously you express your intent. You can't just be like, hey, what's up? But like, yeah, you can reach out anytime. And so, you know, to never dream of being able to do something like that is like, it blows my mind. But like, as you were saying, you have to dream big. Like, be realistic of that dream too, right? Like if you say I want to live outside the country, but you also say I literally met someone who is very idealistic for me, but they just, don't want to live outside the country. Is that living outside the country so important that you're like, oh, I have to do it for 10 years? Or, yeah, I can do it for a couple of months. And like, you know, just taking those, being willing to negotiate, you know what I'm saying, with yourself. And I think that that's okay. It's okay
Yeah.
to negotiate with yourself and like, you know, not necessarily not live the dream, because it's like we all have these things where like I think about and this could be sound so trivial, but I also think about like a situation that happened when I was at home. So I got my driver's license, right? And um well, renewed my driver's license. I've been had it. And they took off my motorcycle endorsement. And like
Hmm.
I was just like, oh man, I don't have it on there anymore. And then I was like, wait a minute, like, is that really important? Like, I had that phase in my life. I got to ride it. I realized I'm not like a motorcycle for lifer. So, like, if it's not on there anymore, is that really that big of a deal? And like, just moving forward with my life with that, not like going back to the DMV, waiting like 10 hours because I don't know what happened. Like, the DMV was once a place where I could get through there in like 30 minutes, but then COVID happened and it like reverted.
Hmm.
I was literally there and I was just like, why am I in person meeting with a person? There were machines here that gave me my driver's license. Like, why is that not a thing anymore?
Those days are gone, man.
But yeah, though, so I think that that's
Yeah.
really cool that you approach it like that. And so
Yeah.
like, man, I really want to say that I appreciate you just taking out the time to speak with me today. This has been
Oh.
a really
Mhm.
great time talking to you, my friend.
Yeah. And Melvin, we've spent. Sorry. We've spent a lot of time talking about dreams, but there are just a there's I think that's so important, and especially some of the things you touched on, like how we're so fearful to dream big. And I understand that because it was easier when we were younger. We didn't have any real consequences attached to that. Like you could mess up tomorrow and still bounce back. And I think
Mm-hmm.
I've even found it in myself. Like I want to move to a different career, and I'm like, ah, well, that now is like, is it going to, is it going to pay the bills behind it? Is something going to go well? Like there are real like consequences to our decisions. So I definitely understand people how it's hard to dream and dream big at this age, especially and as you get older. Um, even to even pivot to something new because you know, it feels like starting over sometimes. But I did want to say, especially being a person that has been like, oh, I got to the dream company, it also came with a morning of the dream because, of course, like I said, you know, it came with its pros and cons, and
Yeah.
the, you know, the cons are there and they're strong. So um, I definitely had to think, you know, this wasn't what I imagined it would be. And I couldn't figure out for the longest time why it was so disheartening for me that it wasn't I was like, yeah, you've been in, you know, similar or worse situations at other jobs. Why are you so sad about this one? And it took me a while to realize it was a dream for me. And I don't know, I guess I would say I don't know where to go from here. Not to say there aren't options, but this was the dream. But taking a moment to really, once I realized that, mourn that, like, you know, it's okay. This was your passion. This was what you were working for years and years and years. I feel like after that, I was able to switch my mindset and start saying, well, you know what? And I know people say that, start thinking about what you get to do instead of you have to do. It's like, I get to create a new dream, and it can be anything I want it to be. I get to, um, you know, I get to think about this again. I get to say, hey, I want to do this in public health, or I can even say, I want to switch completely and go over here. I get to dream again. And I think that's even a great stance to take because, you know, it is another opportunity. It's another opportunity to see my life go in a direction I didn't even imagine it would. And that could be just as great and fulfilling or even more. And maybe I get to do it again at some point. But wow, what a blessing to have the opportunity to see maybe two dreams come true in my lifetime. And that really helped switch my perspective to start dreaming again and start to dream big because I don't believe I'm average. And so I don't believe I'm destined for average things. So I do believe, and that helps me again dream big because I'm like, you know, I can do it. I'm fully capable. I'm going to dream big. And worst come to worst, we don't hit the goal. We're going to get as close as possible to it. One thing I'll also say about me is I think that people tend to be an or person in life. So you can do this or you can do this. And I'm a very and person instead. I'm like, so I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
So I think like even going back to the example from earlier, there was no point where I said, I'm going to go abroad or I'm going to really buckle down and really focus on the romantic aspect of my life. I said, so we're going to do both. What are you willing to sacrifice and how are you willing to, you know, make it work so both can happen? And that's
Yeah.
where we get the, you know, 2 months and spend a little more time in Atlanta, or you can go for years and maybe you're giving up the other side. But I feel like sometimes we leave behind the and put in the or instead because we're I don't know, we're not as flexible. It has to happen in a certain way. And it's like these things can happen, but what are you willing to give up to make it an and situation?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. You know, like you said, like you never stop dreaming big, but like there's this whole resiliency that has to come with that. And like resiliency in the sense of building it. Like we usually look at or not usually, but like in recent times we've looked at resiliency as being kind of a negative term because it's like we've had to endure so much. You know what I'm saying? But
Hmm.
like I think, you know, it's that whole saying of like pressure makes diamonds and fire makes gold. Like my dad literally was having this conversation with me when I was at home saying that you have to have add fire for the meat to cook. And so it's just like building that resiliency is just you get to that what you think is that breaking point. And you have to be resilient for the good and the bad. But like always remember that like, you know, you can dream like you were saying, like you can dream again. Like it's not just because you get to a point, you have it, and you know, it's all a blessing because the fact that it happened in the first place, right? It adds to your narrative. It adds to who you are as an individual. And like the more that you can build upon that and you keep on pushing through, it's just like you kind of surpass that, what you said. Like, you're not an average person, so you're not gonna do average things, because like, of the more you're pushing yourself and you're being resilient through it, and like getting to that next level and becoming that and person, and taking that time to figure out how do you make that and happen. And that's the work that comes through being resilient to get to that point. No, this makes so much sense to me. I love it. I think that um, this is some really great stuff. Like, I, I really appreciate you.
No problem.
So, I do have some lightning questions that I do on every show. So, like, I'm going to run through these and then let you get to the rest of your day. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. So, what's your favorite relaxation or self-care activity?
Um, I would probably say I really like skincare. So I'll always really, for some reason, it just makes me feel better. I will say I know I have really good skin genetically, so it really just is for the feeling that it gives me. But I enjoy skincare. It just makes me feel like I'm taking care of myself. So yes.
No, I love that. I love that. Best book recommendation.
Um, I know that people would usually give like one of those self-improvement books, but I'm actually going to give a fiction book. I just feel like I know that people, but every time I read fiction, I definitely feel like it helps in staying on our topic. It helps me dream again. So I like Homegoing.
Yeah.
I forget who it's by, but it is such a good book. I will probably read it again at some point, but it was one of those books you can't really put down. And it was a story, intergenerational story woven together. It really shows for me, I guess, how the impacts of our decisions, our lives really impact not just the next generations, but your generations to come, your bloodline. So it was so cool. Very good.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Mhm.
One person you want to thank for your journey thus far?
Of course, I'm going to thank my parents. um, I always say, and people laugh at me when I say this, but if you really think about this, this is 100% true of my parents. I always feel that the encouragement my parents gave me in saying like I could do anything that I wanted to do or be anything that I wanted to be was so beyond just I get lip service. Like I
Yeah.
really feel like the level that they instilled that in me and really made me feel that that was possible was I tell people it this way. I feel like I consciously made the decision not to be the president of the United States at any point in my life. And they laugh, but I'm like, that's how much confidence and how much my parents really instilled in us that if you want it, you can have it. Like if I were to tell them when I was younger, I wanted to be president, that's not something they would laugh about. That's not something they would discourage or say was a little high. That would be like, okay, so what are you going to do to get there? And I really think that that also has really pushed me in my career in life to say, all right, so what are you going to do to get there? You can have it. What do you want to do to get there?
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. Just you dropped so many gems. This is gonna be some really beautiful. I look forward to like just going back and listening to this conversation.
Me too.
All right. Well, you have a great rest of your day.
Great. You too. Thanks.
This has been another episode of Don't Be Coy with Uncle Lew. As always, I'd like to thank this episode's guest for a great conversation, as well as thank you, the listener, for joining in. Whether you're a first-time listener or a regular, I always appreciate your support. If you like today's episode and ever want to listen to more, subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. And to join our community and access future bonus content, be sure to visit dbkpodcast.com.